Well, good afternoon, everyone, and happy St. Patrick's Day. I did put on a tie because it's the only green thing I have specifically for this occasion. But I want to welcome everyone to the joint committee session of our Health and Human Services and Education and Culture committees. But I want to begin by saying how appreciative and fortunate we should all be that Chairman Rice is with us today. He suffered a horrific car accident earlier this week, and thanks to a car that was able to thankfully contain him, but also our first responders, Craig is with us today, and it shouldn't be lost on any of us how fleeting life can be. And when we saw the images of the vehicle, it was really extraordinary. So, Craig, we're so appreciative of you being here. Shocker that you don't even take a day off after such a significant car crash. But we appreciate your leadership, my friend. And in a minute, after Councilmember Novato, I'm going to turn it over to you to make some comments and assume you're going to have some things to say about this. But thank you all again for joining us. So we are here today to discuss a critically important issue. And I am going to be very brief in my opening comments because I want to give Councilmember Novato the longest runway here to provide some context and background for this important issue. But we do know that our students have experienced challenges that have been unimaginable for any of us, especially those of us as parents, to comprehend and process. And it has been extraordinary these last 2 years to see what our students have gone through and the crisis that is before us, which demands action and bold thinking, which is why we are here today. So I want to turn the mic over to Councilmember Navarro to provide some context and background for our discussion and her proposal and the discussion we will have today on the expansion of our wellness programs here in Montgomery County. And then I'll turn it over to Chairman Rice, and I believe Councilmember Jawanda, who will be joining us in a moment or two, would like to make some opening comments as well. So turning it over to Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Chairman Albornoz, and it is indeed wonderful to see Chairman Rice as well. One of the interesting things about serving on this council is that you do become family, and I've always seen him as sort of like my little brother. So it was just such a scary moment, and I am just so happy that you are well. And I kept saying to him on text, make sure you get some rest. So I will say, make sure you get some rest. But we are here today to address a really important challenge and a really important need in our community. And it has to do with something that all of us collectively on this call have been working towards. This notion of addressing mental and emotional health in our communities, specifically when it comes to our young people. Pre-pandemic, it was something that was always on top of our agenda. And I know that particularly these two committees have worked very hard in doing whatever we could to enhance this type of provision of these types of services. Now, it's not lost on anyone that, a pandemic that literally 2 years ago we thought would only last a couple of months. Now here we are 2 years later, still trying to figure out how to address this extraordinary disruption. And one of the areas that I know all of us have been really concerned about has been the impact that it has had on our young people. The sustained stress, the sustained grief, loss, lack of social interaction, all of that has come together to really exacerbate to a degree of crises, issues of mental health and emotional health. And so this is why we have arrived at this moment to perhaps work through a very, what may seem like an ambitious proposal, but in my opinion, it's literally just a down payment. It's just an intervention that we absolutely must do to begin to provide direct access to our young people in the schools, but also, our faculty, our staff, even parents, if they need to. It is going to be so critical that we acknowledge that having that kind of space within the schools is going to be important for everyone. And the idea here, and I want to also just explain this, is not that this proposal will automatically, in a couple of months, result in a full-blown wellness center like we have, for example, in Wheaton High School. We know that's unrealistic, But I do know that we have found innovative ways in the past to address issues. Perhaps, as I'm proposing here, we have portables that we can then condition to that to use in this case. I know how difficult it is to hire licensed social workers, licensed, counselors or psychologists, etc. But you know what? We also have some models and some best practices that we can draw upon to start to provide that kind of appropriate supports for the student population of Montgomery County 2022. And so the idea is to embed a space, this opportunity, so it's seamless. And so we're not saying to students or to family members, et cetera, hey, call this number, go over here, go over there, but that they know and they can become accustomed to having a space that they can access. And so this is not a new concept, as I've said. We do have wellness centers already, and we do know the difference that it makes. But I do want to take a moment to thank everyone who has engaged in extensive discussions about this particular issue. Most certainly key staff in Montgomery County Public Schools, with the superintendent being really involved in this, our Department of Health and Human Services, which is led by Dr. Kroll, our own council staff. And I want to thank Council President Gabe Albornoz, because I know, he was very involved in this in the past when he was a director of the rec department, but he's also been a real partner in thinking through this for us to do something bold in this moment in time. I also want to, shout out our central office staff, Ms. Essie McGuire, Ms. Vivian Yao, other staff that has worked with my office to produce very quickly a comprehensive proposal that I do believe, responds robustly and promptly to the feedback that we have gotten from students, parents, and staff at MCPS. We have had town halls, we've had personal conversations, we have met with a lot of community members, and we have always heard the same thing. I particularly appreciate the valuable feedback that I got from the leadership and members of the MCCPTA Mental Health Subcommittee when I met with them. And there was a thread throughout, and the thread was, we're in crises. We need to embed this presence within the schools. And even though it may seem like, oh my God, it's a lot of money, it really is just a down payment, because we know how difficult these times are. And we also know that it could have really devastating consequences, as we unfortunately had to witness here in our county with the shooting at Magruder High School. We know that there is a continuum of need in our schools and for our young people. So the last thing I will say is that I am hopeful that we will respond in an innovative way. I think that this wellness centers should house supports from culturally and linguistically proficient resources, like our street outreach network. I mentioned that we have best practices in the past. I consider our street outreach network a best practice. And I was thinking maybe now this phase can be called the school outreach network. But I just want to pause and explain why. We know that our students, many of our students, may not necessarily even respond to a suggestion of, go talk to your counselor or go talk to a social worker. Many of them want to establish trust with people who they feel perhaps have understanding of my lived experience. Perhaps they speak my language, they look like me. It's someone I can confide in, it's somebody that gets me. And we cannot overestimate the importance of having that kind of connection in our schools, given the demographics of our schools. So this is why the Street Outreach Network, which has done extraordinary work out in the community that perhaps we don't hear a lot about, because that is kind of like the point, is that they're there, they're mediating, they're establishing connections, etc. We need that presence within the schools. They're already being asked to be in the schools. I have heard teachers talk about the importance of having them involved and the difference that it makes and how quickly students are to connect with the members of this of this particular program. So that is one piece that I feel very adamant. We need to now begin to incorporate, obviously in collaboration with the school system, but having a school outreach network folks there will make a huge difference. There will have to be triage, of course, because they are not mental health professionals, but they can make that connection, be that bridge, so that all our students feel like I can feel comfortable doing this. I think MCPS, of course, will be involved in identifying the additional type of staffing that we're going to need, as well as our Department of Health and Human Services. I want to acknowledge that the county executive has included $3.7 million in his proposal to expand mental health supports to 10 high schools. Of course, my hope is that this will be embedded in this broader proposal. We're not here to duplicate, we're here to leverage every single resource that we have. So that's great news. And I have spoken to the executive about this particular expansion, and he has definitely been supportive. Lastly, I'll say that we know the time is of the essence. We know that this is the right thing to do. As I said before, we have worked on a lot of different models in the past. I know that I am particularly proud of the work to expand models like back in the day when I was on the Board of Education, the Kennedy Cluster Project, of course, linked just to learning, which we continue to work on. Wellness centers, as I said before, I was involved in Wheaton High School, family strengthening initiatives that we all have embraced, and also expansion of the street outreach network. So we have a lot to draw from. But one piece that I do feel we need to not ignore is the support to our middle schools as well. So as we work on this proposal, I hope that we're also working on figuring out ways that we can provide that support to the middle school, because there are a lot of needs there. And so finally, we'll hear from our staff about the proposal. It really is, there are two tracks. There's the immediate phase, the interim phase, which is to start immediately. And so that hopefully we can have these spaces ready for the next school year or earlier if possible. But then there's a longer term track that we would all have to work on. I guess those that come back, to the council and the new council members will have to work on, which is to have a longer term approach to this so that we can absolutely have the solid, at fidelity, established wellness centers in all the high schools and hopefully even middle schools. So we have two tracks, but the immediate one, the interim phase, is what's in front of us today. And with that, I just want to thank all of you, thank all my colleagues, because each and every one of you has been a champion in this space. Those who were here before this term, and then those who are here now, everybody understands that how fortunate we are in Montgomery County that we have all these assets that we can leverage and that we can deploy quickly to respond to the needs of our young people, our families, our faculty, our community. Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Well said. Perfect context, perfect background. I'm now going to turn it to Chairman Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. And I first want to thank you and all of my council colleagues, the council family, for continuing to support me in this incredibly scary time. I will just say that I certainly feel very blessed to be in the position I am, to where I'm with you today, but also able to participate in a council meeting just such a short time after the accident. I'm also very happy that the other person who was involved in the accident seems to be on the mend as well. That's incredibly concerning to me also. So just really want to say thank you to everyone who sent out their thoughts and prayers, and those who I've talked to directly. Just really want to thank them for their continued support. It comes as no surprise that Councilmember Navarro is certainly leading this effort, one in which she knows all too well from when she was on the school board, has seen a continuous need for us to make sure that we're supporting our students. And when it came to the Kennedy Cluster Project as a first sort of kind of foray into this wraparound service that we knew that needed to be provided for students as well as their families, it was just incredibly important for us to make sure that we built on that model. And so seeing these high school wellness centers that have been developed over the years have certainly been ones that have helped when it comes to addressing many of the issues that many of our students are challenged with. The key is, as you heard this from Councilmember Navarro, is the ramping up of these efforts and trying to make sure we can do so as quickly as possible. Of course, many of the challenges that befall us financially are going to be one of the ones that we'll certainly have to address. I know that we're dealing with the constrained CIP that currently exists with making sure we're trying to keep some of our projects on track. And so figuring out ways to do that, balancing with what the county executive has put as a down payment, which is incredibly important, I think, to what Councilmember Navarro was talking about in terms of setting up some of these that may be more of the intermediate sort of structure beyond the permanent structure that we expect to see at every single one of our schools is a great flexibility. And so when we get into it, I'll certainly look to staff to help guide us, MCPS as well, HHS, to just determine strategically how we can best go about seizing the opportunities that we know are before us. We need to do that as quickly and as aggressively as possible. And then also laying out a game plan for us, understanding we're not going to be able to do them all tomorrow. And so how we go about setting a procedure that lays out that track that still is aggressive, that still is something, because we do need them all tomorrow. The reality is that we know, just based on all of the things that are out there, that it's going to be difficult for us to do that tomorrow from a physical perspective and physical space, just based on where some of our schools are. So I look forward to continuing this conversation. I really think that this is a great initiative moving forward that we all support in terms of us knowing how important this is. It's tied to the recommendations that came out with the blueprint for Maryland's future and the Kerwin Commission recommendations. And so certainly looking to see us really step up and do everything we can to address this as quickly as possible. So thank you very much to Councilmember Navarro for her leadership on this effort, and certainly look forward to working with staff to figure out what the right game plan is for how to aggressively move this forward as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you so much, Chairman Rice, and thank you, Councilmember Navarro. So both of you laid out the context perfectly for our discussion today. And as was noted, we know there's a crisis before us. We know there's a ton of need. And so this is another concerted effort to try and address that need in real time and acknowledging we need a long-term strategy. So I want to thank Ms. McGuire and Ms. Yao for putting together a packet. If you had to put the job descriptions of the people to put this packet together, you couldn't find two more remarkable people, especially with the fact that both have been associated with these programs for a long time, and Ms. McGuire's experience both on the MCPS side as well as the legislative side in the council has a unique perspective that's especially helpful in this context. So we have an incredible team of individuals here representing the executive branch and MCPS, who I know have been working around the clock and continue to work around the clock to support our children, youth, and families during these challenging hours. I'm going to give both the HHS department and MCPS an opportunity to make some brief opening comments, and then we'll turn it over to Ms. McGuire and Ms. Yao to walk us through the packet and set some context for the decisions before us this afternoon. So I will start with Dr. Kroll.
Good morning, Council President Albornoz and Vice President Glass and Councilmember Navarro and Rice. Councilmember Rice, glad to see you here and upright and healthy. I saw the pictures of the accident and those were horrific. So happy that you're with us and safe. Councilmember Navarro, you talked about this being a down payment on the future. I kind of like that frame. I think that the reality is that we are starting from behind, because the entire country, as it relates to mental health, and the county included, has gone down a path of not necessarily supporting the development and mental health of our well-being, mental health and healthy development of our children for many years. So we're playing catch up. So we have some catch up to do. This starts that process. I think the if the pandemic has done anything, it has given us a fresh look and forced us to take a look again at the behavioral health needs of our children and our families in the county. So this is a starting point and a good down payment. Healthy high school wellness centers represent one point in the partnership with Montgomery County Public Schools and HHS and the county government in working to serve the needs of our children and families. There are many others, and I think you'll hear some of that as we talk about this today, and as you hear from the school system. I am happy to hear and delighted to hear that we're talking about trying to figure out how we put healthy high school wellness centers in every one of our schools. I think that is a great goal for us, and we need to be moving down that path. I'm also mindful of the fact that high school wellness centers have a very specific meaning in COMAR and in the legislation, and so there is a whole process of building and components and elements that will take time, as you've pointed out, for us to flesh out. But this is a starting point, and I think that our immediate concern right now is obviously the behavioral health support and other supports that our children need and our families need as we come out of this pandemic. The county executive's FY23 budget and Councilmember Navarro's letter from of March 7th reflect the need to start with what is most urgent and to build towards a larger system and support services. And for us, I think that is not just staffing for behavioral health and PYD and case management services, but it is street outreach network, it is crisis stabilization, and a whole series of other initiatives that we need to strengthen, but also some new things we need to be thinking about. I said in the Board of Health the other day that therapy isn't the only thing that's therapeutic. Therapists aren't the only people that are therapeutic either. And so there are a lot of different ways to approach how we promote health and well-being for our students. I think a street outreach network team as mental health, as therapeutic engagements with the community and with students, and so figuring out how we strengthen that and as well as add some new things that we haven't thought about before, but I know from my conversations with my team are in the mix, and with MCPS they are in the mix for things that we can do to help our children. So our goal is to continue, and you'll hear about this, I think, as Ms. Treadvance talks to, as we talk about staffing for our teams, space to work in, coordination with other HHS programs and efforts to try to support families, and our larger goal to create a safe and supportive and welcoming environment for children to learn in. And I think that is our larger goal as well in our partnership with MCPS. So thank you, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. I know that we have representatives here from MCPS, both on the operations as well as facility management side. Mr. Davis, I'm going to turn it over to you, if that's okay, to just speak on behalf of MCPS and providing some opening context and background. There are two discussions today, operating and capital, but if you could represent both of those just from a high level, and then we'll turn it back to staff to walk us through the packet. But Mr. Davis?
Thank you, President Albornoz, Vice President Glass, and to the remaining members of the council. Just appreciate you having us today on behalf of Dr. McKnight and also Ms. Rubin, our chief. Just really appreciate the partnership that we continue to have with DHHS. And actually, before I go any further, my prayers and condolences also to Councilmember Rice. I did want to make sure that I expressed those to him and for continued speedy recovery. Just again, thank you for the opportunity to be here today as we continue to talk about our well-being and safety and security. And notice we say well-being first, because we know, as has been said over and over again, if our students are not well, they cannot be safe and secure. And so I just want to emphasize that the well-being does come is the priority with us working together. And I'm just so excited for our continued partnership with our DHHS partners and others, but specifically with our DHHS partners to continue this work. For example, I know street outreach was mentioned, and then I was just at Magruder yesterday, as a matter of fact, and working very closely with the community. And I continue to hear from not only from the adults, being the staff and the parents, but also from the students for the impact that our street outreach network, just one, or school outreach network, as Councilmember Navarro said, is really making an impact in that community. So just truly appreciate the opportunity to continue to do that work together. I know that we cannot do that without of course, our DHHS partners, but also with I know I have several colleagues on the line and working very closely with our social work, with our restorative justice. And as you mentioned, I know Mr. Adams is here also representing our operations side of the house. So all of us working together, it does truly take a village. And I'm just excited to be a member of that village to help to continue to move forward, as I said, with safety, with well-being, safety, and security. So thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to the conversation and continued partnership.
Thank you. Ms. McGuire, I'm going to turn it over to you to sort of walk us through the packets and lay out the discussion points for today.
Thank you. And I think, clearly what we're hearing today is that this is a critical and also ongoing conversation. It is continuing to move and will continue to move. The packet does lay out working from Mrs. Navarro's proposal that she put forward in a memo on March 7th and has outlined obviously this morning, or sorry, it is afternoon, isn't it? Really working again in two tracks, as she said. One is to represent the urgency of moving forward with services to really expand the mental health and positive development aspects of the high school wellness service model, as well as to also plan for that long-term build out to really expand more aspects of the high school wellness center model to all high schools across the district. And so again, really looking both at sort of that urgency of what is and what is feasible to really increase and strengthen those support networks in this moment as quickly as possible, and to be able to sustain that at a service level while we continue to plan for that longer term phase at the same time. So really, again, the packet does lay out the specific steps in both of those areas. I just want to again thank certainly all of the colleagues on the screen. I appreciate all of you and working through this. Again, as we've discussed, this conversation also is part of the larger conversation that also will be continuing around the mental health supports more broadly. As Dr. Kroll indicated, certainly this is a critically important piece of that network, and the council will be returning in Health and Human Services and Education and Culture Joint Committee meetings in your budget work sessions to really continue and look at the context that this piece fits into with the mental health supports that support our students and families in MCPS more broadly, which, as we know, again, rely on that partnership between MCPS and DHHS. So that piece, I just want to say, I think, again, we will be working to really be able to explicate more broadly that broad spectrum and bring that back to the committees for that conversation in your budget deliberations. That said, we'll take one step back and just, again, acknowledge the work of everyone here to really help to flesh out the estimates and details in this proposal. One more thing to mention, which is, again, so much of this does depend and will depend on the work that's done school by school to really understand what are the service needs, what are the space needs, what's going on at that school. That's planning work that will be happening in real time. Everyone on the screen here is going to continue to talk together and to continue to work that through. But that is some of the clarity in that deployment will come through that work, which again, as Mrs. Navarro has outlined, we will both put forward the urgent services and continue to do that planning work to target and tailor them at the same time. So that's sort of the broad strokes of there. I'm happy to pause there unless you want us to go more specifically through the elements. Also want to defer to my colleague Vivian, who certainly has worked more closely with the aspects of the service components of the proposal as well.
Yeah, let's pause there. Councilmember Navarro has her hand up. Councilmember Navarro.
Very quickly, Mr. President and Chairman, I just wanted to really highlight what Dr. Kroll said about how COMAR does have specific requirements for what a wellness center has to be. And I think that it would be totally appropriate, I mean, if we needed to, not call it wellness center at this point, maybe they are wellness rooms or spaces, wellness spaces, as we have the interim. And then as the, I guess, next council starts to work on the more specific at Fidelity establishment of complete wellness centers, that can begin to shift. So I wanted to point that out because I do know that there has been some confusion about, is this a full-blown wellness center? How much is that going to cost? Can you do it right away? And what I'm saying is that, as government, lots of times we get criticized because we're too rigid and too bureaucratic, et cetera. And what we're trying to do here is to avoid that and instead be innovative, creative to respond to the needs of our very, precious resources, our students, our faculty, our parents. And so if we need to change the name, I think we should, and we should lay out, as Ms. McGuire said, this notion that, there has to be an assessment of what each school may already have and incorporate that, because the idea is not to duplicate, that is not the point. The idea is to leverage whatever we might have, but make sure, again, that we have these types of very important ingredients or components like PYD, like street, school outreach network type presence to respond to what's happening right now in real time in our schools.
I could not agree more, and I'm having massive deja vu right now. When we built Excel Beyond the Bell, we had expanded the program, and then we got a letter from Comar saying, this is childcare. And we said, what? And that would have significantly added to the price and not have perfect be enemy of the good. And so we then worked with the folks at the state level to help ensure that the out of school time programs complied and stayed in bounds, but did not cross over into childcare. And there are some similar elements to this discussion here. Everyone acknowledges our kids need help right now. And as we phase this in, let's add those elements that help address not all, but more of the needs than we're able to address at the moment, but in a way that's sustainable and reasonable, and it does not run afoul of the regulations, which obviously all of us want to stay in bounds for. So great point, totally agree. Ms. McGuire, back to you. And yes, I think it would be good for us to go through individual components, but I see Dr. Kroll has his hand up. Dr. Kroll.
Thank you, Councilmember. I just wanted to underscore Councilmember Navarro's point about this, and that the building is one thing, but no building ever healed anybody. These are people engaging people that do the healing and the support. So I've asked my team to think about this as high school support services and support systems, that a building will be useful, a place will be useful, but I've done therapy on a basketball court. And I know the Street Outreach Network has done therapy in the parks and in soccer fields and other places. So that work, that clinical work can take place anywhere. A building and a space is important for us to have for certain parts of that. But the main thing is to get the services in place. So I think about it as a service system in this moment, that one day we'll have a home, a physical home.
Amen. Ms. McGuire.
Thank you. So then I'll just briefly outline the interim phase as it has been put forward. And again, as we've discussed, the intent of the interim phase is to be able to provide those mental health and positive youth development components of what we often see in the high school wellness center model, so that those services will be in place in each high school no later than the beginning of next school year. I believe that the intent there is to jumpstart the planning, development, potentially hiring, and also potentially services, if at all possible, again, given the urgency, as soon as possible in this fiscal year and this end of this school year, understanding that that lead time would be helpful to ensure that services can be operational and up and running in the fall when school begins. This interim phase recommendation does include both operating dollars to begin that process in FY22, operating dollars to continue and annualize those services through FY23, and does anticipate some capital cost needs in the form of relocatable classrooms, as well as dollars to potentially modify interior spaces to be sure that space is available as needed for additional staff and additional service spaces within the schools. Again, the estimates putting this together really were representative of sort of budget figures and pieces that we knew, since things were again being put together just to reflect that intent, reflect what we knew about services and about spaces at that time, anticipating that the planning phase that will go on would help refine that work.
I think it'd be appropriate to hear from Mr. Adams now, just on the facility side at MCPS. And I know he's put some work into this and has conducted some analysis. So for a little bit of context on those space issues, Mr. Adams, I'll just turn it over to you to make some comments here.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Councilmember Alvarez. So, just to echo, the sentiments today, this has been a quick paced, but collaborative process. Really want to acknowledge Mary Beck from OMB. She's been very helpful, working through, some of the evaluation. But I would say from the school perspective, one of the first and foremost things that we look at is, just understanding the spaces, understanding adjacencies in the building. As Councilmember Navarro has spoken to, we do have experiences of understanding, how to place different functions within our school buildings to make sure, students feel comfortable. They feel invited to some of these spaces. So we're diving in. We are looking at this from a perspective of putting these service spaces in buildings and supporting with portable classrooms. It's much easier to put a classroom in a portable building than it is to put, a service type of function in one of those. So we are looking at a variety of options. As it stands right now, with the 10 school model from this immediate approach, 5 of those schools would require additional portables just to manage the growth. I would say, balancing this work with our growth, we do still see growth at the high school level. So we are still obviously looking at, as we build out capacity for our classroom spaces, how do we add services and add those support spaces along the way. But we are in a good place, from my perspective of being able to stand up spaces to support students next year. We've looked at this. We've looked at everything from outside to inside. We're looking at long-term visioning as well. We understand every dollar is critical. So any dollar spent today, how do we leverage and utilize that in the future as well? So we're very close to having physical plans to share with our partners at DHHS, with obviously our schools and OMB. To make sure everyone's comfortable with the approach and the intent, and hopefully start the process moving forward very quickly.
I appreciate that. I do have one question just on the space issue. So obviously we want something on campus so that it's accessible to other programs and services and helps with operational issues. But, there are facilities within very close walking distance, even across the street in some instances, of a number of our high schools that we access for different programs and services. I'm thinking specifically of some of our nonprofit organizations. And at Blair High School, for example, there's a church literally across the street that rents out their basement for programs and services that Identity, Gapbusters, MMYC have taken advantage of for different programs and services, and even some programs within the school that were sort of a cross-section. Is there an analysis of spaces within reason, right? I mean, not that would require a bus to get to, but within a stone's throw of some of our school campuses? I would imagine it's more expensive because you got to rent. It's not owned by the county, so there's an expense issue. And I know there's a staffing and operational cost that would be on top of that. But just curious as to whether or not that is even on the table for discussion or thoughts.
Yes, that is a great point, and one that we are constantly exploring. I would say one of the things that we are looking at first, though, however, is some of our closed schools. We've had lots of conversations around, about obviously both with MCPS, but also DGS around how do we maximize the use of our buildings. We do have a large inventory of buildings. So, Even previous to this conversation, we've started the review of those facilities as both places to house potentially those part-time operations in our schools, but also those community supports as sort of that landing hub, but then also to go to the schools and provide those supports. So we are exploring facilities such as that as sort of that first round of do we have space that can accommodate this from you don't necessarily need to have office space in a school building. So can you put that somewhere that's adjacent that can also support these services, but focus primarily on the school building, for the students. The second piece, as you mentioned, is looking at the private, the private side of facilities and looking for opportunities. We do have some successes working with, both private real estate, but also, nonprofits such as religious organizations to stand up operations in those buildings. I would say that does become a little more complicated, just from the perspective of, anytime a student goes into one of those and it's under the purview of both MCPS and even the HHS, we want to make sure all the provisions are there. So I would say that is the second step of what we're looking at. But yes, to answer your question, we are looking at all options here. But I do think we have, if we really take a step back and use our spaces very wisely and creatively, I think we can make this work within the purview of both the county and MCPS facilities.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. You just gave me major flashbacks because Centro Familia also had an office in the basement of Marvin Methodist Church right there across from Blair. I guess the only thing that I would respectfully submit is that, I am a big believer in the concept of community schools. And I think that there is something very powerful about embedding these kinds of supports within the school campus, especially for a lot of students that do already face particular barriers. And so, I've been thinking a lot about this. What is the impact, regardless of socioeconomic status or anything like that? I just feel like when you're in a crisis like these, to add a barrier and to say, well, go there, or if you go to this address, that's what you're going to receive. I feel like this moment is very different from anything that we have ever encountered, which is why I kept going back to this notion, because of the feedback that I've heard, that we need to eliminate as many barriers as possible and embed it also to normalize this notion of reaching out, of sharing, right? Because not every, Dr. Kroll said, is like not every situation is a situation that elevates to a licensed social worker or a psychotherapist. A lot of times there are issues of feeling disconnected. There are issues of not feeling seen. There are, that might escalate into some kind of, mental health crisis later on. So there's just so many benefits, in my opinion, of having these types of spaces within, the school campus versus sort of satellites. Now, this notion that Seth was talking about perhaps there could be some school functions, administrative or something like that, to free up space. I think that makes sense. But for students themselves, I feel like we need to think more centrally than externally.
Yeah, I agree. I meant I should have prefaced what I said in the short term, until a space is identified within a school. But clearly we need to have this on campus so that it can be leveraged with all the other programs and services offered. I totally agree. Ms. McGuire, turn it back to you.
Thank you. So the interim phase then again does reflect some dollars to provide the spaces in the schools, as we were just discussing, and as Mr. Adams and Mrs. Navarro laid out. Also that anticipates operating dollars. And I would say here, again, we really were working off of sort of the broad stroke budget numbers that we have in terms of using the mental health and positive youth development service aspects that are currently in place in the wellness centers. As has been mentioned, the executive's recommendation did also include some dollars that would place mental health supports at the schools. And as Mrs. Navarro said, certainly as we go forward, we would look to align those depending, again, of course, on the committee's directions, but to be sure that we're making use of any and all supports that are available there. But given that recommendation just came out, council staff has not had the opportunity to fully explore that recommendation. So the operating costs that are here, again, do reflect sort of those components as we currently see them budgeted in other locations and extrapolating those to across the system. I do see that other council members might want to chime in here.
I didn't see who.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rice and Mr. Glass both have their hands raised. I just didn't
Got
want
it. Okay, got it. So we'll go to Chairman Rice, followed by Vice President Glass.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. And so, yeah, I actually think what Ms. McGuire just framed, and it speaks to what Councilmember Navarro said at the beginning. Look, we need to seize the opportunities and maximize wherever we can in the greatest way we can immediately and do those first, right? Then there will be some of the future aspects in terms of temporary space that we have now that still at least houses some type of program that then we can accentuate and have a plan on how to do that. Not just saying that it's going to be there, but I understand, and I don't want to speak for Councilmember Navarro, but I think in terms of me and my conversations with her before, we need to commit, right? So it's not just about just saying, and whenever we find possible, we'll do. No, we need to have a strategy on how to move forward. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. I do think that it will be important for us moving forward to be able to identify exactly what those things are, those pieces are that we can move forward right now and price those out so that we can get those as a part of what we act on, and then have another plan that's incorporated as well in terms of how to build this out in the future and have a set process of what it is that we're going to do for each of the impending years, as Councilmember Navarro said, that then future councils will need to continue to act upon and ensure that those dollars are still invested each of those years in 2023 and 2024, for example. So from that standpoint, that's where I am in terms of thinking that, again, if we can have council staff work with HHS, work with MCPS, work with our street outreach network and other community partners to really identify where those opportunities exist right now for us to immediately act, price those out and get those in, and then also work on that game plan for something that may take us a year out or 2 years out. So I just want to make sure. And so let me pause and ask Councilmember Navarro if I have an accurate understanding and if you agree with that kind of assessment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will say that we have already delineated some of the next steps in terms of pricing some particular items, right? So in the packet under next steps, there are particular dollar figures for operating, for capital in the interim. And I want to make sure that we have an agreement on that to get going. There is no doubt that there's going to be a need for further conversations, but the staff has already done that work, which has been amazing. We wanted to make sure that before we came to the Joint Committee, that kind of work had taken place. And so there is some of that already that we can react to, that we can discuss, so that we can introduce the special appropriation as soon as possible, because both DHHS and MCPS is going to have to get to work immediately if we are going to keep this kind of ambitious timeline. But I do agree with you that there's no doubt that we will have to have further conversations about, how do we continue to enhance this and what is going to be that, full-blown, robust model for the future. That is definitely the case. But we do have, they've done work already to price, what we are going to need for the interim.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Council President. That's what I just wanted to make sure that I delineated. And so if we can work on that piece of it while still understanding there are some other puts and takes that we'll have that are out there, I think that'll allow for us to set ourselves up for success moving forward.
Thank you. Council Vice President Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, everybody, and thank you, Ms. Navarro, for putting forth this proposal. I mean, it is absolutely essential that we do everything that we can to make sure that our students' wellness is addressed. We know that these wellness centers and mental health supports have been necessary before the pandemic, but clearly the last 2 years have put even additional strain on our youth, and we have to do everything we can to make sure that they are made whole and that they have these types of support systems. And that is exactly why last year, before this joint committee during the FY22 budget, I had recommended a mere $2.6 million so that a clinical licensed social worker could be hired at every high school, recognizing the acute need even back then for when students were to return to school. And I think that was a missed opportunity. And I think that there have been a number of other instances where we talk about student well-being, particularly when they were not in schools. And we, as county government, waited until after they returned to school, whether it is school safety or school or student mental health. We waited a little too long, and now we're playing catch up, and that's why this is a really important conversation. But last year, when we were talking about the proposal in the FY22 budget that I referenced, one of the concerns that was expressed in this joint committee was that it was not necessarily the council's place to make that priority or to push it at such a quickened time frame, and that the MCPS itself and our support services would not or might not be able to accommodate that need. And I say that being fully supportive of this proposal because we need to do it. But I wanted to check in with MCPS and HHS and everyone else just to make sure that we can accommodate this need, because I'm reflecting upon what was shared last year.
So, Councilman Glass, I'll let MCPS join as they will, but I will start by saying that I think that there's a lot I think about this. One of them is that we don't know the depth and the scope of the need. We just know it is great at this point, and it is going to be it's going to take some time, as I said earlier, to ramp up to be able to meet that need. But we're going to do that as quickly as we can and as diversely as we can. You talked about the school's recruitment of social workers, but the schools have also done some things like they're working to expand dads on duty, to try to bring family members and community into the schools to do some of that support work. Those are places where I think that work makes sense, and it is the collective effort to create a safe environment in the schools that we're talking about building now. So the answer is we have to meet the need. Do we have to meet it with therapists? Not always, and maybe not in these early days, especially not in these early days. We may have to think about other creative ways of doing that to create a space for kids to be safe and healthy. But yes, we're going to be challenged around that, especially as we get into the latter part of FY22, just looking ahead at some of the next steps around this. And we can talk about that when we get there, but we will be in a much stronger place come the fall, over the summer and into the fall.
No, and I agree with you, right? And when you also look at what the reality is that we've only hired 20 social workers, which is not as many as we need, and that's a reflection of the regional demand and national demand within that profession. That compounds this as well. But the sentiment that you shared is it is a moral imperative. We have no other choice. I think every one of us agrees with that. I'm just trying to, again, understand the role of the council and the will that we know is in the community that's channeling through us, how that translates into action.
So one of the things that I'm appreciative of in Councilmember Navarro's sort of framing of this is a level of generalness in the commentary and in the narrative, so that it's not hire social workers, hire mental health therapists. It is mental health service and support, which allows us along with our providers that are in our high school wellness centers now and future providers, to figure out what makes the most, Atlanta MCPS, to figure out what makes the most sense to put in place in a high school as we start ramping this up. It may be dads on duties. It may that are with training. It may be street outreach network in some schools and not others as a priority as we start to ramp up. There may be some places, I would guess, where we do want to align with the therapists, the social workers that MCPS is bringing on board, and create supplemental services or other kinds of services in those schools. So the way it's been crafted so far, it looks like it gives us that flexibility to be creative and innovative in responding to the need.
A broad roadmap to get us to where we need to go, right?
Exactly.
There you go. Well, Ms. Navarro, thank you for creating that broad roadmap for us to get where we all know we need to go. I don't know, does MCPS, do you have any thoughts about the flexibility?
No, thank you, Councilmember Glass. If I might add, just to follow up what Dr. Crowell said, I really believe that we cannot, and I've heard it said before, we acknowledge, number one, that we are in this mental health crisis, which is a challenge, yes, but it's also an opportunity for us to look at how we do business in a more innovative way. Looking at what are some of our current practices. We can't hire our way out of, I keep thinking, I've heard that many times before, we can't hire our way out of a mental health crisis. We will definitely embrace the opportunity as we have. You mentioned the 20 social workers. I believe since you received your last report, we're up to 22. We had some additional interviews this week, so we're constantly, we're making it incrementally.
That's 10%, that's good.
Yes,
that's good.
So I want to celebrate the success. But I also want to look at what are some of the current practices that we have that we can really operationalize and bring to scale. So for example, our mindfulness rooms, we have those. Are they in 100% of our schools right now? No, they are not. And can we use them in a more innovative way and again, bring them to scale? Are we using our daily, for example, our daily social emotional lessons? We have many of our schools that are doing that, but again, are they doing 100% of our schools who can benefit from that? And I don't just mean for students, I would add for our staff to benefit from some of our current practices. So I think it's a combination. And again, I would just embrace it as it is a challenge, but also an opportunity for us to be more innovative in our approach.
Well, I appreciate that thoughtful reply and the reply before by Dr. Kroll. So good. I hear you. Again, I appreciate the roadmap and the broad strokes to get us to where we need to be. And again, express my appreciation to Councilmember Navarro for putting this forward. So I yield back, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. You made a couple of points that I want to follow up on just to kind of level set expectations. And I'm sort of somewhat uniquely positioned to be able to talk about this in the first person. So the relationship between the Department of Health and Human Services and MCPS is a critically important one, but also complex because we have different sets of agencies with different sets of supervisors whose work crosses over and intersects every day. This is true of our school health nurse program. And the beauty of the wellness program is that it provides this really well thought through synergy between the staff within each of those particular centers and the corresponding work and interaction that they have every day, both with the teachers and the administrators in each of those schools. And that's why I was particularly excited about this proposal for expansion. Adding social workers is clearly important and something that has to be done. At the time that your proposal was made, since then, there has been great discussion and collaboration between HHS and the Department of, and MCPS that has brought us to this point with a lot of heavy lifting among folks that are on the ground who have come up with a robust model and made a series of recommendations, some of which appear in the county executive's operating budget now. So it wasn't that there wasn't interest in supporting proposals from last year. It was, from my perspective, important for the operating agencies to be able to work through and devise a plan and make recommendations that can then be funded. And that's what we have here. Councilmember Navarro, before implementing this plan and implemented a holistic model before that, had many conversations with MCPS as well as the Department of Health and Human Services, which I believe is a best practice and something as we look at, especially special appropriations to address immediate needs, the collaboration and synergy between the legislative and executive branch to make sure we put everyone in the best position to succeed and to be able to implement these programs and services and initiatives with fidelity is really important. Because I've seen firsthand instances in which that fidelity didn't happen and the program did not meet its full potential. So that's why this conversation is perfect. And the context in which we are having it is also really important because we're also thinking about this thoughtfully in planting seeds, taking advantage of programs that already exist, leveraging resources, and then being able to come up with a reasonable plan to take these to scale. So this is a good conversation, and I'm really happy that we're all here supporting these efforts now. Councilmember Navarro?
Thank you. No, this is a great conversation. I mean, because definitely something that, it's not new, but I will say, I think that's what we are all here called to do, especially right now. The experience of the pandemic is one that, in my humble opinion, means that we don't have time anymore to just have constant rehashing of old models that don't necessarily work or serve our communities, because everything has definitely changed. And so I am just very inspired by the opportunity to work with so many of you, staff at HHS, staff at MCPS, my colleagues, our central staff, my office staff from other council member staff, that all really truly have given themselves permission to think creatively in order to meet this moment. That's what this is all about. It's about meeting this moment. All of us have had proposals. I mean, I had one. Councilmember Albernos had one. Councilmember Glass. We've all had these proposals that didn't quite go, and that is sometimes unfortunate and sometimes it's disappointing. But the good news is that we have an opportunity right in front of us to quickly retool and quickly move forward. I'm reminded of our work with the racial equity and social justice law. When I met with folks in King County, when I went to Seattle to meet with them, it took them 10 years to do that. We did it in a year, in 2019, right before the pandemic hit, right before the George Floyd murder happened. And those lessons from that experience of going the entire year and working on this issue actually had some very specific impact when we were going through the pandemic and what we did. And so I am an optimist in terms of knowing that whenever the opportunity presents itself, we have to pivot and figure out how to get there. And I think, to me, this is what this moment really calls for. So I hope that we can, get to the point of making the necessary decisions here to move forward with the funding, to get this going. And as I've said to some of the stakeholder groups, I just had a meeting right before, this meeting with the Silver Spring, Justice Coalition. I've had meetings with MCCPTA, et cetera. This is to get started, but it will definitely need a lot more care, strengthening, expansion. It's going to need all of that. But we need to get going and we need to establish it and just move forward. So just wanted to share that because I appreciate so much, Council Vice President Glass comments about, the need for social workers, et cetera. It's not that we're not going to do that because we have to, but we just also have to be realistic about what is it that is in front of us and how can we get there. And as Dr. Kroll said, there are very many different ways that we can provide that as we go and as we integrate those other types of supports.
Yep, I see. Ms. Beck, sorry, you've had your hand up. Ms. Beck. Ms. Beck, Mary.
I did just want to say that I hear me?
Your connection is not very good. You're kind of choppy a little bit.
Mary, maybe turn off your video and see if we can hear your audio. That might help.
Okay, I did. Is that better?
We can hear you,
yes.
Is that better? Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, and I appreciate Ms. Navarro talking about maybe we want a different name for the interim process, because the county executive did support the $3 million for the relocatables, and we were prepared to add the other $7 million. But as we got closer, we realized we hadn't had the chance quite to go school by school and think about what we really needed to do. And so I've talked to Mr. Adams. He's very creative in terms of thinking about how can we set something up that maybe could be reused in the ultimate phase out. But I think we're also trying to be careful about being creative with use of space, as Ms. Navarro said. So we are really prepared to support this on the CIP side, but we did want like another couple weeks to just sort that out school by school so that we can make sure we're not asking for more than we need, but we're also providing the space that's necessary for that service delivery.
Got it. Thank you for those comments and that context. Ms. McGuire, I turn it back to you.
So thank you, and I just want to perhaps clarify, we've had so much good conversation about the different phases. I do just want to circle back, and as Mrs. Navarro was highlighting, if you go to page 6 of the packet, does outline what are the specific next steps associated with each of the elements. And the interim phase, as we've been discussing, would have associated with it some dollar amounts in FY22, potentially $3 million operating to the Department of Health and Human Services, and then $5 million of capital split between the Wellness Center PDF and the MCPS relocatable PDF to jumpstart the capital. So again, that does represent that full scale of the positive youth development and mental health service components, beginning to phase that work in now, moving it forward into fuller implementation in FY23. I would just sort of highlight, so again, I'm sorry, just to say that those would be the supplemental pieces that would have been anticipated in FY22. Following some of the conversation here, again, as we were saying, these conversations are evolving in real time, and it may be that there would be opportunities to reevaluate some of the funding requests there, depending on the committee's direction. But that is the anticipated piece of that. Then there would, of course, for the interim phase, be the continuation of those services and some additional capital work into FY23, which would be approximately $11.5 to $12 million in operating costs for DHHS, and then again some additional capital dollars. Again, as you were hearing both from Mr. Adams and Ms. Beck, particularly with the capital request, there may be some opportunity to adjust it. I do just want to emphasize that as the discussions around this proposal were evolving, the Board of Education certainly has also highlighted its support and specifically did put forward an addition to the relocatables request in the amount of $3 million. So that is the amount that that piece then has been moved forward by the board, and jurisdictionally, of course, as well as substantively. That's important to note. And I'm sorry, Mr. Albanos, I see Dr. Kroll has his hand raised also.
Dr. Kroll.
Thank you. Just an observation and maybe a recommendation around the next steps around the FY22 supplement. One of them is that as I looked at it and has had some preliminary conversations with my team on the budget side, it would be useful for us to understand and walk through what that $3 million, how you got to that number, how that number was derived, because I think there may be some differences about what was discussed versus what's in this, how we got to this number. And then the other one is just, and this is my least favorite conversation, that we are talking about FY22 in the final quarter of FY22 at a time when everybody knows all the things that are going on, budget, contract renewals, et cetera, end of the year closeouts. There's a lot of work we need to do with partners around what they can do and what they can do rapidly, what we'll be able to stand up rapidly. but there's some planning, and there's a lot of planning that needs to happen. So I'm not sure what the how much of $3 million we need to help us jumpstart for FY22. So that would be my observation, that we need to spend some time talking about what's actually needed to make this work.
Thank you. Ms. McGuire, do you want to talk about that $3 million that Dr. Curl was referring to?
So absolutely, and I think again, the basis for that figure was, as Dr. Cole has emphasized, this is the last quarter of the year, and our estimate of an annualized cost for the annual services, again, of those components in the wellness centers was approximately $12 million, $3 million then representing that last quarter of the year, with an understanding then that certainly understanding the challenges with hiring and other factors, certainly still hoping that there would be an ability to be able to jumpstart the hiring, the planning, and have those pieces in place so that there wouldn't be a delay at the end of the fiscal year. So that, again, was just our attempt to try to bridge over that fiscal year gap with the representative budget that we were working with.
So I think that 1 quarter of the year budget is a quick way of getting to it, but it doesn't take into account what we might have to do in terms of additional contracts, modifications, renewals, emergency procurements, however that process is going to unfold. So it'll be useful for us to walk through that with the team, Bessie, to give you a clearer sense of what's feasible. So we're not putting money in the budget that we can't use in the time that we have in the quarter, and so that we can maximize whatever we can do in that quarter to get ourselves jump started.
Councilmember Navarro has her hand up.
Thank you so much. So, well, first of all, I just want to make sure my colleagues in the committees understand that I did not bring this proposal to the Joint Committee without having had these conversations. And as a matter of fact, it was HHS who provided a lot of these numbers and a lot of these specifics. We spoke, we met with MCPS. Mr. Seth Adams has been extraordinarily helpful along with the entire team, and quickly doing a scan of what could be done immediately. So as many of you know, I do not bring forward particular proposals unless they have been fully vetted, and therefore I think that we just need to move forward with what's in the packet regarding the most immediate need for the funding. The FY22 piece. We need to just do what we need to do. I think that there are some things that obviously will take a little longer time in terms of this conversation about partners, but I do think that we can immediately move to start putting out there the recruitment of more school outreach network types of specialists. That is something that is under our purview, and we can see what other things we can put in place immediately. But I do not want to delay this any further. I think the message that we send to the community is that, somehow we believe that this all can wait. It's waited long enough. And again, I want to, shout out all the staff that has worked around the clock to get us to this particular space. And so the notion of having to wait 2 more weeks, 3 more weeks, and more talk and more meetings just sounds very, very, it's a very disappointing way of doing this. We're in crises. There should not be any more, conversations. We adjust all the time. I mean, that is something that we do with budgets. We do that. If for some reason we find out that something costs a little bit less, we can adjust. If somehow we found out that we needed more, we can adjust. We have been doing that nonstop during this pandemic. And so I think that respectfully, I would submit to you that, again, a lot of work has gone to get us to this moment, and that we should move ahead with the particular special appropriation in order to get us moving, so that for sure, when the students come in, or even before, that many of these spaces have been stood up and have been are there for them and for our staff and for our families. So that is just my position on this, and I hope that my colleagues understand that, again, this is not something that has been brought half-baked, and no doubt we will take into consideration the budget that was submitted and incorporate what the executive has also included, but I think we need to move forward.
Councilmember, I'm sorry. I wanted to be clear that I was not in any kind of way saying that it came forward half-baked. So forgive me if that's how you heard it. What I am saying is that no matter what we do in terms of going forward with it, those conversations that I alluded to have to happen because they are about the how we do this work. And that's the piece of work that has to happen and what the actual cost will be for doing that work and how quickly we can get it done. So yes, I think that's what I'm referring to in this last quarter. So.
And I'll note too, this still needs to come before full council, for a final vote. So there is a little bit more time between now and then to adjust some numbers between now and then. But I agree with Councilmember Navarro's assessment that, given the work that's been done to get us to this point and the infrastructure that already exists of the players that are on the ground, and there's already been a lot of programmatic coordination. I certainly understand and respect the administrative challenges with getting these things off the ground, but this to me has an infrastructure in place that's a little different than some previous proposals that have been made before. So that's why I'm absolutely supportive of seeing if we can move this forward. Council Vice President Glass.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. President. And so I guess now is the time where I'll just, continue saying that I fully support this. But I do have concerns about processes, particularly at the council right now, where there are a number of special appropriations that are either being considered or are being introduced when the FY23 budget was just introduced earlier this week, or conveyed to us earlier this week. And it does not in any way diminish the importance of any of these programs or projects. But I want to make sure that we have a process here that is true to the budget and true to our overall processes. And given that this would not be implemented mostly until the future, as chair and council president, I'm just curious your thoughts on the budget process over the next few weeks and months.
Sure. So I am familiar with all the special appropriations that you're referring to, Vice President Glass. I certainly understand where you're coming from. And, as is always the case, each of us has the opportunity to push something forward that we feel is necessary. And there are two that I've been associated with recently, but have followed what I said before in engaging with the corresponding agencies who would be responsible for carrying those out. And as we've all acknowledged, you as well, we've got growing needs before us in real time that have been difficult to process and fully wrap our arms around. And so I think that generally speaking, we prefer to go through the normal budget and fiscal process, but these haven't been normal times. And so this is a good example of what we're discussing right now to meet an immediate need before us that in a perfect world, we would be able to have it fit into the normal budget cycle. But in this instance, and given where we are, I think it's appropriate for us to talk about this in these specific terms. But the good news for all of us is we have like the best central staff around that is keeping track and keeping tally of each of these items and making sure that we don't write checks that we can't cash later and that fit into this broader puzzle. And we've even referenced that in this conversation. And Councilmember Navarro began her comments by acknowledging the $3+ million that the county executive put forth in his budget, and that there's synergy between what we're talking about right now and expanding and leveraging the resources that we have before us. So I don't think there will be many more special appropriations between now and the end of this fiscal year. And it's something that we're certainly keeping track of. Most of the special appropriations that have come forward have also been in the public health space, which is consistent with our fight against the pandemic and COVID, which is what we've been doing all along. But it's noted, and it's not the perfect way of doing business. Get that, totally agree. But that's a little bit of context and background and where we go from here. Councilmember Navarro has her hand up.
Yeah, as the chair of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee that has helped this county maintain its very strong fiscal health. First, I actually I started working on this proposal and had it ready before the budget was presented, but I wanted to take a step back and work with everyone to make sure that we had a very robust, complete proposal. So I appreciate that observation because it is a little bit different. But I think as Council President has just said, I mean, we all had to, and that's what our residents expect. It is their expectation that we recognize this space where we are now, which is that we are starting to hopefully understand what this kind of post-COVID-19 looks like, and at the same time respond to those points of crises that are still before us. We that's what we did. I mean, that's what we have done. And so that, I think, responds to your question in terms of process. This particular term on the council is the term where there's been record special appropriations. I don't ever recall in the past, we would have very few a year, but it's because of the emergency that we find ourselves confronting. And so same with this particular notion. The problem with waiting, because I thought about all of this, is the fact, as Dr. Kroll said, I mean, it takes time to figure out, the hiring, all of that kind of collaboration. And we've just said our young people and our families don't have the luxury of that time. So that is why, even though it's a bit different, this is why we are elected, is to respond. But also, I agree with Council President Albornoz. I don't think there will be very many special appropriations coming, because now we're going to engage in the budget process. But I think we have all agreed that this emotional mental health state it's really a crisis at this point. But good observations.
Yes. So I guess, do we need a motion to move the staff recommendation for the interim within the FY22, or Ms. McGuire, do you think it would be more appropriate to go back, write the special appropriation more formally, and then bring it before full council? What do you think is the best path?
So I'm sorry, I do just want to note that Mr. Rice has his hand raised. I don't know.
Oh, my fault. Sorry, Craig. Councilmember Chairman Rice, please.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I just want to go back to what I said before, because I think that it's really important for us. And Councilmember Navarro, I know that you guys did a lot of due diligence in terms of setting this up, but it seems as though there's still some conversations about things that folks are saying that are a little bit different from what were said to you before in terms of where some of these things are. Because I've heard comments from MCPS, I've heard comments from DHHS. I want to just hone and make sure that the numbers are correct before we move forward. I'm not talking about something that takes longer than a couple of days for us. And I'd like to know exactly what those true numbers are in terms of, like I said at the very beginning, at the outset of my comments, in terms of what we can move forward with now, based on the fact that, sure, we can set up portables, but if we don't have the infrastructure, or not the infrastructure, but the programming to go along with those portables, then what's the point? And so I just want to make sure that we've got all that squared away. It does not sound like that is solidified in terms of that everyone's on board exactly what the schools are, exactly what the needs are, what the programming is going to be. And because we are talking about such a constrained budget, I know that we have other things and other puts and takes that are there. I as chair of education and culture, especially when it comes to CIP, we're trying to keep Burtonsville Elementary and other things on track. I want to understand from the county executive what their commitment is on this. I heard from Ms. Beck saying that they're looking at more. I'm wondering if more is going to come for some of these other priorities that are out there as well, including African American Health Program and some of the things we're looking to do that addresses health that also ties into this. We have supplemental appropriations that are being presented from, the council president and Councilmember Friedson when it comes to some other things. There's a lot of stuff that's out there. And so I just want to make sure that we're understanding this in the context of all these working pieces and what's happening and how this is moving forward to manage these funds in the best way possible and be strategic about it. Because I agree with Councilmember Navarro that the impetus is now. There is no need to wait, but I just want to make sure that everybody is saying the same thing. And I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that everybody's saying the exact same thing. There are nuances in terms of what it is that folks are saying. I just want to make sure that we have those details together that are where everybody's saying, yes, these are the schools, this is what we're doing, this is the exact thing, and these are the services that are going to be provided. I have not heard that yet. And so that's where my concern is for some of these things. I agree with Councilmember Navarro. Some of them are already listed and some of those are good and golden. And we can do that today, but that's not the whole amount that's listed in the packet. What I want to do is make sure that if we're talking about this whole amount that we're going to lock in via appropriation, not on the reconciliation list, but via appropriation, that it is something that is able to be utilized, because the last thing we need is to lock down dollars and then they not be appropriated in the sense of services that could go to something else that we can also move forward with as well. So that's just my concern there. So I would just like to put a marker in saying, I just want to dot our I's and cross our T's here to make sure that we're doing everything we can to maximize as many pieces of this as possible and what realistically we know and we commit to moving forward. Because again, I don't want to bring this up, but we committed to mental health counselors at the school system level and at DHHS, neither of which have come to fruition, and we've locked in money, right? That could be going to other things as well. And again, that's not to scrutinize. You know, I know that it's challenging out there, but the reality is it hasn't happened. And so in a time in crisis, in a time in which we need this, right? Our students are asking for it, and MCPS has not delivered, right? DHHS has not delivered. And so from that standpoint, and I know why, you know, so it's not for the sake of not trying, but it is one of those things where, again, I just want to be mindful of this instead of us making it seem as though we're going to be able to accomplish something that unfortunately, for all the well-intentioned actions, just aren't able to happen. And so I just want to just level set a bit in terms of saying that that's what I'd like to see, is just that, you know, just another look at this to say, okay, realistically, what is it that we can do? How much of this can we do right now today and move forward? And I am in full 1000% in support of that. But if we can't do it, why are we even putting it down there? Why are we locking in funds when we know that that's not going to move forward until second quarter or third quarter of next year, and make those appropriate kinds of changes that say, look, well, this is going to take this amount of time or that amount of time or whatever. So I just put that out there.
Thank you, Chairman Rice. Councilmember Navarro?
Yeah, thank you for those observations. I mean, I think it's very important to acknowledge that, you know, whenever the community has stepped forward and asked for something, whenever we find ourselves in a moment of crises, it should not be acceptable for us as collective leaders not to deliver. I totally understand that. But I am a little bit taken aback because, and maybe Ms. McGuire can answer this, there were all these conversations with MCPS, with the HHS, to be very specific about what this will mean. And I know I spoke with the superintendent about, you know, this approach, noting that it was not going to be an unrealistic proposal of full-blown wellness centers, but this was an interim approach to precisely have that runway to begin to incorporate. However, if for some reason there needs to be a little bit more clarity, I think by Tuesday when we get to the full council, we can bring all of those details, put it into the special appropriation and move forward. My great concern is that once again, we are utilizing the same rhetoric we have utilized in the past, which is we're not sure, we don't know, how long is it going to take, you know, and shame on us for not moving forward when we need to move forward. You know, I don't know in what language do I need to say it. This is an interim proposal. We have street outreach network specialists that have been specifically trained in a lot of these types of supports. That is something that we can begin to ramp up right now. Dr. Kroll can immediately begin to ramp up this type of support within our schools. Mr. Adams has identified which are those schools where we already have some space, which are some that we need to look at further. Dr. McKnight acknowledges that we're going to need some portables to provide us with that type of capacity. This is why they sent that particular amount, I believe it was $3 million for this specifically. We know that we're going to need some other types of supports that then HHS and the school system and partners can work on. That is something that would be ongoing. But the idea is not to sit here and wait, as we said, because we're going to make the perfect the enemy of the good. The idea is for us to make a decision. So this is what I brought forward, and I worry a lot. I worry a lot when I start to hear similar conversations and similar, proposals around the fact that we need to wait and we need to wait and we need to wait. This is what happened last year. There was a holistic model that I had put forward. I wasn't going to bring that up because it's not relevant, but it was the same exact thing. And so here we are again. So I absolutely believe that we can do this right now. As I said before, we adjust all the time. All the time. We say, you know what, we need a little bit more. This is what we have. This is what we don't have. I think we're ready. I think our staff has done extraordinary work already. There's enough information there for us to move forward if we are committed to do this and give everybody the runway they need to make sure that they can get going. This is the expectation that we have right now by all of the folks who are watching right now who said to me they were going to watch this. We're in a crisis. So I would like for this joint committee to make a decision, knowing that, of course, we're going to have subsequent conversations. It is our role in oversight to ensure that this is, progressing. But the idea that now we want to wait more and that there's, we need more time to think and talk or whatever, I'm sorry, respectfully, I have to say that this would be a great disappointment because this is not what we have been elected to do to respond in a crisis. It is not. This is not a super unrealistic proposal. It is actually very well thought out and realistic in terms of what we can do right now. And so, I submit to you, Council President, that I think we have enough information to move forward with preparing a special appropriation to be introduced on Tuesday. And if there are some additional points that HHS wants to bring forth, the executive spoke to me, said that he was on board. We have enough time to incorporate a little bit more of that, but I think that we're ready and I think that we should move and I think that we are late. And what we should have done a long time ago, quite frankly. So I would move that we, support what is in the packet so that we can have a special appropriation that is introduced on Tuesday and that we can begin the ball rolling on something as important as this, understanding that it is the interim approach. It is not a full-blown thing. It's the interim approach, but it's something that we need to do, and we need to do it now. So that is my motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. There is a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
So can I ask a question,
Sure.
Mr. President? Because I'm not sure exactly what the motion is, because we have 3 next steps that are listed. We have the introduction of supplemental appropriations that amounts to $8 million. We have the second next step, which is CIP funding that amounts to $98 million. Then we have the third, which is the interim phase for $11.4 million. Is it for all of those things? Is that what the motion is for at this point?
Councilmember Navarro, could you?
The motion is for the interim proposal. Ms. McGuire, can you please describe that?
Yes, thank you. So the what I would understand to be the next steps at this juncture, because there are, and if I can just take one step back, I do want to say also that sort of as council members are highlighting, we have had conversations around a number of different pieces today, and that is a little bit reflected in the next steps as well. There's the interim phase, as Mrs. Navarro has put forward. There is also the executive's recommendation. That is another piece where some of these differences, I think, are coming in terms of the descriptions of services and how and where things would be deployed. So I think that may account for some of the differences in the conversation that we're having today. At the same time, then there is that next year and CIP timeframe. And I say that just as by way of framing the next steps. The first piece to the interim phase would be the FY22 appropriations. Those would be special appropriations, and as Mrs. Navarro has highlighted, those could be introduced by the council as soon as they can be on the agenda. And then they would need to go through the regular appropriation process. This certainly is an in-depth committee meeting, but it would be at a minimum public hearing and then action. So those steps would still need to be followed for those FY22 actions. And the FY22 actions, excuse me, do total $8 million as represented, $3 million in operating to DHHS, $2 million in capital funding to the high school wellness PDF, which is in the Montgomery County government CIP, and $3 million in capital funding to the relocatables, which is in the MCPS CIP. And as we've discussed, the Board of Education has already requested. And in fact, the CE did, as I believe Mrs. Beck and others have highlighted, the CE did transmit a supplemental recommending approval of the that $3 million relocatable piece in addition to the other outstanding relocatable request, which isn't relevant to this conversation. Just wanted to say that because there are a couple of things out there. So those would be the $8 million of FY22 appropriations that would be involved in the interim phase to begin at this time. Then there are FY23 actions that would be associated with that. However, those would, in staff's view, need to continue through the FY23 budget process that, of course, the council is in the middle of both capital and operating. Those are laid out here in terms of the next steps, but the FY23 actions would not be an immediate action before you. Those, certainly the committee can take a recommendation on those at any point in time. However, the committee also could have those return through the rest of the course of your FY23 budget discussions and through the FY23 operating and CIP reconciliation processes. The rest of those would continue. So those would be sort of the two tracks that would be represented here by the next steps.
So let me make a couple of observations, Chairman Rice, and I think a sweet spot is starting to come together here, at least in my mind, that I want to try and describe. But Chairman Rice, and I think Councilmember Navarro, you had comments as well. But before Chairman Rice, Councilmember Navarro, I just wanted to make sure, I should have done this before, is what Ms. McGuire said consistent with the motion that you had intended?
Correct. She just described my motion, which is my motion is for us to move forward with the FY22 supplemental appropriation, as she described, is the $3 million to operating for HHS, $2 million capital funding in the High School Wellness Center PDF, and $3 million capital funding in the MCPS relocatable classroom PDF. The rest is there for illustration purposes of what would then entail a long-term process, which is something that, of course, we would work through its appropriate budgetary timeline and process. But my motion is for us to move forward with the FY22 piece.
Got it. Chairman Rice, I'm going to attempt to connect some dots here, but before I do that, I'd like to turn it over to you to just react to Councilmember Navarro's motion, because you had requested and wanted clarity.
Yeah. So with that, I would just ask Councilmember Navarro, if we do, as this then goes to full council, hear from DHHS that the adjustment needs to be made in terms of that $3 million, because maybe there are some things there that they have to adjust, whatever the case may be. As I've heard from Dr. Kroll, it's a possibility that's out there. We can make those adjustments before full council. But then the $3 million, I just want to make sure again that I'm understanding, because I want to second this motion. The $3 million that's already allocated from the county executive should cover the relocatables. Is that not the case?
I don't believe so. The $3 million that the executive has in the FY23 operating budget, the $3.7 million, is in the operating budget for FY23. The $3 million of relocatables.
So maybe Mr. Adams can.
Mrs. Beck was mentioning something about an amendment potentially. That's not something we've received, and I will say that while she has mentioned it to me, also I'm not familiar fully with how those pieces would come together.
Look. Let me second for the point of discussion, because I want us to move forward in a parliamentary way that makes sense. So I'm going to second for the for discussion, because I have a couple questions out there that are floating out there, because I thought I heard from Mr. Adams that they already had something like this outlined. I thought I heard from Ms. Beck that they had something like that supported. Is that not the case?
So I'm sorry, I should let them speak, but I think that may be where we were talking about the CE's rec as distinct from. Mary, do you want to clarify?
Sure. I'm going to turn my camera off in case that helps with the audio. So what the executive assumed with regard to the relocatables is that the cash would be spent in FY23 but that the appropriation would be approved in FY22, similar to how schools gets appropriation early before the cash goes out the door. So essentially, the funds would be committed in FY22 for the relocatables. For the second piece, which we did not yet send over because we were trying to fine tune the numbers, we had assumed up to the 7 million that was in the initial staff estimate. And again, we had assumed the cash going out the door more in 23, but most of that appropriation in 22.
And so I just want to be clear, Mary, when you're talking about these assumptions, this is a prospective action you were thinking about sending over, right? I'm sorry, I just want to be clear. This is not something that is embedded in the current transmittal.
It was not transmitted. We were preparing to transmit it, but then at the last minute, we really just started to question the numbers, and we felt we needed to do some more due diligence on it. But we had created fiscal space for it, and we had assumed that almost all of the money would be spent in FY23. We had a little bit moving into 24, quite honestly, because of some of the staffing considerations that were discussed earlier. The executive's proposal assumed 10 schools receiving services in 23 and the other 9 in 24. But again, we had almost all of the money being spent very early in FY24. Again, it's more just a matter of going school by school. That was the piece we had not had the opportunity to do. But we have, in the executive's recommended CIP, there is the fiscal capacity for this.
So I apologize, Mr. Rice. I just wanted to clarify that as a technical matter, I think if we wanted to make note, if the council wanted to make note of those assumptions, we would need to allow time for a transmittal and a reconciliation of that. I don't believe so. That's just that's my current understanding.
I think just one other point too. I know Ms. Navarro talked about a different name. We had contemplated a different project for the interim phases. We thought that made sense to show it as a separate item.
Okay.
So
Chairman Rice,
so,
go ahead.
So, Mr. President, look, so it seems to me as though there's still some moving pieces to this. So again, I still support us moving forward with this, with the understanding that when we bring this to full council, that there may be some adjustments that are made just based on what I'm hearing, because now I just heard Ms. Beck talking about something else that they assumed would be a little bit different in terms of strategy. I support Councilmember Navarro's strategy. I'm not sure what the county executive is looking to move forward. So let me just be very clear that just as I support her and her initiative, I support the strategy that she's laid out, that's laid out in the packet. I would just say that there are a couple of assumptions that are still floating out there that I just want to make sure that are addressed. And that is, again, with the HHS ensuring that they are able to utilize the full 3 million within that context, and it represents the true and actual cost, as well as the capital funding piece, which amounts to the tune of, we're looking at $5 million in capital expense. The school system just came to us and talked about a number of projects that are going to be, postponed or pushed back based on, FY22 and 23. I would just highlight for MCPS that we only have limited funds. We have spending affordability guidelines. And so understanding those priorities that are out there as well limits our ability when it comes to accelerating other projects also. So I just put that out there. Still doesn't mean that I don't support Councilmember Navarro's proposal. And so from that standpoint, I stand in my second of the motion, but would just ask for that flexibility in terms of understanding when it comes to DHHS, that we are looking at some possible, sort of adjustments based on whatever is happening regarding DHHS's ability to actually spend that money and utilize it to the effect of what Councilmember Navarro is talking about. And Dr. Kroll, I'll just say to you personally, you know that this is a priority for us. I know that it's a priority for the department as well. And so this isn't something that we want to slow play. And I'm not saying that you would. I'm just saying that it's very clear from Councilmember Navarro's passion, but then from all of us, that this is an issue that we care about. I agree with her wholeheartedly. This is a crisis and we do need to respond quickly. And so whatever we can do in terms of really, working within our structure to make sure that we accelerate this as quickly as possible and get things up and running as fast as possible, I fully support. But I also do understand that there are limitations to that as well. So I'd love for you to just commit to saying this is in fact what we can do. I know what Street Outreach Network can do, and Mr. Cardona, who hasn't had a chance to speak yet, but look, I know the great work that Street Outreach Network and so many other of these partners that would be with these facilities have done in our communities, brothers and others that are out there. And so from that perspective, I just fully support it and think that we need to push the envelope in terms of what it is that we try to accomplish. So with that, I turn it back over to you, Mr. President.
Councilmember Rice, sorry.
Wait, Dr. Kroll, before you speak, just really quick, Councilmember Novato is in the queue, and then I'll go back to you, right. Dr. Kroll. Councilmember Novato.
Thank you. Well, again, I guess I pretty much said everything. I think I had assumed by all the, again, work that has taken place and all the conversations and the meetings and the figures and the information that has been shared by everyone here, meaning, MCPS, the HHS, our central office staff, everyone, that this was something that everybody embraced and understood was doable, especially because, again, being very mindful of the current state of affairs, knowing that we couldn't push the envelope further, that this was, I think, a reasonable response to, as I said before, a crisis. And I feel still very much that, and again, it's not just passion. I think there are people in real pain right now out there with extraordinary uncertainty in terms of what the present holds, the future holds. So it's to me it's not so much driven by passion, although I'm passionate about a lot of things. It's driven by a sense of absolute urgency that collectively working with all of these professionals came up with an interim solution that was reasonable and that I thought could be the starting point of something much bigger and much more robust and holistic. Something that would hold a lot of those extraordinary best practices that all of us have studied for years. And so I just, I guess I don't have any more diplomatic words to articulate other than I've been here, done that. I've been in public office since 2004. And I know when there's a will, there's a way. So I think for this council, the question is there a will to put forth and adopt dollars to incorporate and embed spaces that will definitely be of great support to our students, to our faculty, to our parents, to support their mental health, their emotional health, at this moment in time of crises? It's a very simple question. When there's a will, there is a way. I've heard it all. I've seen it all. And I know that this is extraordinarily doable in this moment in time, right now. This is for the council to decide. I know that the executive has had, some interest in this as well. He has something that he incorporated. He may have another idea. That's cool. But the bottom line is that for me, that is what we're here to do, is to make a decision. Do we believe that there is a way forward to provide this support right now? Of course, there are 1,000 other issues out there that all of us want to work on, and we will. But I want to be focused on what this means and the impact that this has right now in our communities. And I'll close by saying this particular proposal, this is not just for, school or a cluster where you have, high farms, high mobility. We're talking every single high school because the need is everywhere. So I don't have anything else to say other than this is one of those moments where as elected officials, we either step up or we can just make excuses and continue to ask questions and continue to wait for answers and just let it go. But I do think that this is absolutely realistic and is absolutely doable. And I know that the leadership of HHS and the school system and everyone will roll up their sleeves immediately and will begin to implement this. I know that we have that kind of commitment and that kind of capacity. So with that, again, that is the motion. It is for this FY22 appropriation. The rest will move itself through the process, but this is so that we can get started and not wait any longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kroll, I know you wanted to chime in and provide some comments, and then I have some observations that I think will be helpful here and move us forward. Dr. Kroll.
So just briefly, an observation and a comment that whatever council decides to put in the budget for these pieces and whatever, there needs to be some reconciliation, I feel, in an ideal world between what the county executive's budget has put forward and this model, because they are two different plans that intersect, I think, largely, but just need some smoothing out and blending together to the extent possible. But whatever the council puts in the budget, we will work to put to use, and we will work to do that as quickly as possible. I'm hoping that I'm misunderstanding, but when I heard you, Councilmember Navarro, use the word rhetoric, I took that personally for a moment. But I want to be clear that there's a difference between rhetoric and reality, and the reality is that my question is, in FY22, what can we spend, what do we need to spend, and that's what are we capable of spending in the time we have in this last quarter. And that was what my comment was about, not about FY23 or beyond. Anything that we don't spend in FY22, we're going to end up having to spend and roll into FY23 at some level to do this work. The commitment is there to do the work. The need is there. The sense of urgency is absolutely there. I am thinking about the rules that I have to follow and that the department has to follow around how we get things done and up and running that always create a drag and take time to work through. But we will work through those and we will get something going as fast as we possibly can. Thank you, Councilmember Alvarez.
Thanks. So let me make a couple comments, observations, and then I think I have a sense of where we are. So a couple of observations. There's way more agreement than disagreement here. Like that seems pretty clear. And there's also organizational capacity and programming capacity. And I know for a fact, and I know that my colleagues in HHS would back this up, and so would MCPS, that the staff that's on the ground right now doing the work to address the needs of our kids are doing so just beyond what they have directly within their budgets to be able to do. You've got folks who are working 7 days a week in many different ways, emotionally and literally, who are doing really, really outstanding work. And so, and again, this is a tried and true model, and we've made clear through our conversations that we don't expect this to be exactly a full wellness model, and that we're providing HHS and MCPS some general guidance that what works best and what's needed the most, we trust in what you all are able to stand up and implement. We want to provide the resources now in real time to be able to implement as much as possible within this fiscal year. And has been noted by Mr. Adams that there has been an analysis done on the physical space that's needed and what's appropriate given where we are right now. And so, you know, a lot of that work has already been done, which is great. And so just taking one step back, I have come to greatly appreciate the legislative process before the council. And this is another of many examples, in my opinion, that's a good thing. So as Ms. McGuire noted, and I want to make sure, and I know all of us understand, but particularly for our public and our community who is watching intently and wants us to take action, as all of us do. So the special appropriation that would move forward would still need a public hearing. would still need a little bit more deliberation and discussion, not necessarily before the committees, because there's an interest in having this go before full council. And so you got a twofer in me right now, both as chair of the committee and as president of the council at the moment this year, that I fully commit to making sure that this does come before full council, and that after appropriation, as I said, there will be a public hearing. So organically built within the legislative process, there is more time for there to be a reconciliation between now and when we formally vote on this, which at the earliest would be 3 weeks from now. But that's why I think, to Councilmember Navarro's point, it's important that we plant a flag to make sure we keep this ball rolling, so that we don't wait then 3 weeks from then, and then you're looking at, the end of April before this could even possibly be implemented. So I think we're in a pretty good place organically, and I think the Ms. McGuire's done an excellent job within the staff recommendation in this interim step, as was made clear, that's what we're voting on, is that interim step, not the full CIP, but just that interim step. But that, again, organically, there will be a longer runway for us to reconcile what the executive has proposed between now and when we vote on this before full council, which makes me feel comfortable in supporting this motion for sure, because it kind of connects a number of dots. So we have a motion on the floor that has been moved by Councilmember Navarro. It has been seconded by Councilmember Rice. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands.
Aye.
Okay, and that is unanimous among all those present. So then, Ms. McGuire, the next step would be taking what you have already put in the staff packet, turning it into a formal special appropriation proposal that will come before the full council as early as this Tuesday, triggering then a process by which we will have a public hearing, and there will be more deliberation and discussion between our central staff and the administration, as well as MCPS, to reconcile anything that remains outstanding. Awesome. So was there anything else, Ms. McGuire, that we wanted to talk about at the moment?
No, thank you, Mr. Alvarez.
Great. So with that, colleagues, and let me just end on this note, everyone's working their tails off from every conceivable level. We're all tired. I'm tired. I'll be very candid. But we can't afford to be tired, and none of us are. The commitment that is set forth by everyone on this call, and more importantly, the folks that are the most directly on the ground interacting with their kids every day, has been truly extraordinary. So I am heartened and very, very optimistic that we're going to meet this moment as we have been, but do even more moving forward. Councilmember Navarro, you'd like to speak as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, colleagues on this joint committee, for this vote. It's obviously not a vote for me. It's a vote that I think demonstrates such an extraordinary sense of compassion for what we know is happening in our communities. And I want to echo what you just said. This is not just an issue of emotional health or mental health just for our young people, our families, our staff at MCPS and HHS, and all of us have been affected by the ravages of this pandemic on so many different levels. And so my hope is that these dollars then can help all of us find more capacity to provide assistance to all of those extraordinary staff members who are right now going above and beyond to provide that kind of support. Many of them, this is not their area of expertise, but they're doing it. And this is what this is really about. It's about expanding that capacity because everyone is spread so thin right now. But I think that this will begin to build in a different model and a different way of approaching this conversation about emotional health, about mental health, about being seen and being supported out there, no matter who you are in our school system. So thank you all, because I know it's never easy to to endeavor in areas that maybe we haven't done before, but I think it's great work.
Chairman Rice is going to have the final word, but I neglected to mention, and this is totally my fault, that Councilmember Jawando is not with us today because of a conflict that he couldn't avoid. But he, of course, is extraordinarily committed to this work and to this proposal, and I'm sure he would have had both his hands up had he been here today. But we look forward to his participation when we get before full council. But Chairman Rice, you're going to get the last word.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And let me just say that, look, I've been on this council for almost as long as Councilmember Navarro has, and over the course of the years have had plenty of opportunities to show courage and strength in the face of adversity when it comes to fighting for things that are important, right? We all have. The key in this whole thing is, and I think that, again, we've learned over the years of being on this council, is that not everything is always possible. We know that. And we know that because we've tried it. And unfortunately, in some instances, it has not worked. For the better of us putting forth all of our efforts and really trying to move things forward that we thought were going to be the best thing for our community. But one of the things that I think is incredibly important for us to remember in this is our commitment to making sure that we continue to push the envelope, something that this council has had a strong history of doing and will continue to do. And there's no amount of pressure or anything like that. This is all about individuals and their individual commitment and goals to try and make things that they know are important in their community to happen. And that's the reason why I supported Councilmember Navarro's motion, because I do think that it's important for us in the context to make sure that we can push everyone as hard as we possibly can to do what we know is in the best interest of some of those people in our community who need it the most. It's the reason why I asked the questions of Dr. Kroll and the reason why I asked the question of Mary Beck, because I want to understand kind of where we are. But at the same time, I also do understand that this opportunity that we have, that you heard from Councilmember Navarro, is something that's seized upon. We have an opportunity to do some really, really great things in terms of accelerating a focus on individuals in their mental, physical health, as well as some of the other aspects around their overall well-being. Something that I fought for on the current commission that said every single school should be a community school in the state of Maryland. And so from that aspect, I think that, again, we're all on record in terms of where we stand when it comes to this being a priority. It's just a case of making sure that our partners, those individuals that are there, are equipped with the best strategy moving forward that we know is going to result in these kinds of ultimate outcomes. And so from that perspective, I again look forward to the continued discussion as we move forward with public hearing and then move forward with full council and ensuring that our departments are fully on board and really there and committed to making sure that we can make a difference and really strike out what I think is going to be the best way for us to move forward, supporting our kids, especially in times in which they need it the most. So I really appreciate the partnership. I appreciate Councilmember Navarro's leadership. I appreciate all of my colleagues and most importantly, our partners who are going to have to do this work because they're the ones who are going to be at the end of the line when it comes to delivering these services and making sure that these things actually happen. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. All right, first pints on me. I think we've all earned some good St. Patrick's times tonight. So thank you all very much. With that, our joint session is adjourned.
Northbound from Father Hurley Boulevard